Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank built as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to another session of Friday Waters. The idea of Friday Waters is to wet the Fridays with fun and yet get fruitful content for the better understanding about water matters in various possible ways. Friday Waters has water talkies, book reading, thesis club, water arts, and meet a maestro. Some of these sessions happening every month depending on availability of our speakers. The focus of book reading session is on bringing author or authors who have written books, novels, or any form of manuscripts, children book, comics, uh, on the water matters in order to discuss with them the making of the manuscript and the issues around the subject covered in it. Besides bringing interest in water conversation, the session will also try to increase the outreach of the manuscript on in the water networks and in the society at large. As we discussed today, Friday Waters book reading session, we are actually having a very interesting book and which is in very many languages, The Tiger of the River. It is an extension of the book which has been already published in other languages, and we have already had discussion on Mahseer through the Mahseer Trust. And to do the honor to discuss the book, we have the author of the book, Dr. Adrian Pinder, and we will also discuss with him the making of the book and go through this tiny book in different parts and also hear him out how the story goes in the book. My name is Mansi Bhargav and I'm from the House of W4W and I'm the host for today. Before I provide some basic details of the book, The Tiger of the River, let me first briefly introduce our speaker and author, Dr. Adrian Pinder. Dr. Adrian Pinder is a director at Bournemouth University in the Global Environmental Solutions at UK. Based at the university, he is a freshwater fisheries scientist and passionate conservationist with over 3 decades of experience of monitoring and managing fish populations. His visit to South Indian rivers, especially Cauvery, in 2010 signified the onset of a personal obsession to address, I will call it passion, to address some of the many knowledge gaps and political challenges which currently constrain the development of effective conservation plans to protect Mahseer. The Tiger of the River was written by Adrian and published in 2022 by the Talking Club, an imprint of Speaking Tiger Books. In addition to having authored this book, he has also written more commercial reports than I can remember, and he has also published over 80 peer-reviewed scientific papers, books, and several popular articles. He is currently working as an international fisheries advisor for several hydropower developers and lenders on multiple infrastructure projects in Nepal. The services he provided include desk review, bespoke survey design, training and supervision of local teams, quality assurance of outputs, and mitigation planning. Let me invite Adrian first to share some opening remarks on conceptualizing and making of the book, especially what inspired you to make this manuscript and who are actually the primary readers you had in mind when you were writing the book. Thank you so much, Adrian, for taking out time. And I know you are in India at this moment, so probably enjoying the warmth other than the people of the
Yeah,
country. Over to you.
absolutely. Hi, Mansi. Thank you very much for inviting me along, sharing this with you today. Yeah, in terms of inspiration, I'm a fishery scientist. I'd never ever considered writing a children's book before. The credit for that needs to go to the wonderful illustrator Maya Ramaswamy, who actually contacted me out of the blue and said that she had read my research and was familiar with the area and asked if I'd ever considered writing a children's book because she would really like to have illustrated the area where she grew up in the jungle. When she asked me, I thought, no, I've never considered writing a children's book. But within a matter of minutes, I thought, hey, that's a
Mm.
really good idea because we've been trying to convince bureaucrats and government officials to make changes to conserve rivers. And sometimes we realize that it's actually the younger generation that we need to inspire because these are the people that are going to be growing up and occupying these positions of power in the future. So if we can educate people when they're young about the importance of fish and rivers, then hopefully the younger generation will make the sort of difference that we all need as human beings to sustain ourselves and the planet.
And so well put, because I think by the time we are at this age, we also realize it is so important also to not only collaborate with them, but handhold them into, making them also professional, sensitive professionals, and also see how the new generation looks at the world and the life around. That's wonderful to get started. And let me come to the basics of the book. The Tiger of the Book was published in 2022, as I mentioned, by Talking Club, an imprint of the Speaking Tiger Club. The book is small with 40 pages of text aimed at 6 to 8 years old. And I must tell you that even if we are not 6 to 8 years old, it is always fun to read children's book. It is so de-stressing and so creative to look at it. Although reports are that the parents learn from and enjoy the book as it is rightly so, then I also really felt very nice looking at the script of the book. I am still waiting to have the illustration around me, because the book is rich with illustration by wildlife artist Maya Ramaswamy, as you mentioned. And how good is that a young person thinks of making a manuscript and you come for the collaboration. The book is available at Speaking Tiger's website or through Amazon. It is translated into 3 languages at present. First into Malayalam as The Humpback Mahseer. The subject of the book was described from there. Recently, it was released in Kannada. Within the next few months, should also be available in Tamil, thus completing the 3 main languages of the Kaveri river basin. So it is also strategic in that way. Adrian, what do you think? I mean, having this in so many languages, and of course, then English is also there for, I assume. And when I went through the script, I was already imagining how it would be. And then later, thank you for sharing the document also, when I could see the beautiful illustrations and life of Matisha. So if you agree, we can just now start understanding the life of Matisha through the book. And over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much indeed.
Just see if you can share the screen. Yeah.
Sound on. All life on Earth needs water to survive and grow. Without water, there would be no trees, no animals, and no people. We humans worship rivers, but sometimes we forget how precious they are. This is a story about a mighty river called the Cauvery, which flows across South India, and all the creatures, big and small, who live in and around it. It's difficult for humans to see beneath the water, but in the river lives a very special fish called the Mahseer. As the bright sun slowly rose in the sky, an orange glow was cast on the Cauvery river valley. The sun's heat burned away the morning mist that was clinging to the river. Slowly, the mist swirled across the rocky gorge. On the cliff, a troop of langur monkeys were playing. Beneath, the river roared. It was full of water from the recent monsoon rains. As the water raced past the playing monkeys, it carried many interesting items with it. Amongst the fallen trees and plastic litter left by humans, a tiny fish, no larger than a grain of rice, was caught up in the flow and helplessly washed downstream. The river carried Matisha, the little fish, to the safety of a sheltered bay, along with many other baby fish. Matisha did not know that she was different from all the other little fish in her shoal. She played happily with them in the warm water, where there were lots of delicious bugs for them to eat. The fish feasted on the bugs, and it was not long before Matisha and her friends had grown to the size of your little finger. But there were many dangers in the water. Bigger fish and hungry birds. The duck or a tasty snack. not straying from shallow water, using her lightning speed to dodge hungry kingfish, Matisha grew and grew. Before long, not so little fish, about the size of your hand, realized she was different to her friends. Some fish had pointed heads, some fish were short, others were long and thin. But Matisha was special. Her entire body was covered in large, beautiful scales. These shone like jewels, making her the envy of all her friends. Soon, Matisha had grown too big to stay in the safety of the bay. It was time for her to find a new place to live. With one brave whoosh of her tail, Matisha set off into the dark, swirling waters of the Great Cauvery River. The river flowed powerfully, but Matisha was a good swimmer. She had great fun playing in the rapids, which created a fizzy underwater storm of bubbles. One moonlit night, Matisha found a pool at the edge of the river to rest. As dark shadows silently moved above her, the water's surface was suddenly broken. An enormous foot came crashing down, nearly splashing her. Matisha quickly moved to a safer position and watched as a family of elephants plunged their giant trunks into the water to drink from the river. After a while, they silently moved back into the forest. Matisha loved exploring the deep pools and caves where all sorts of mysterious fish lived. One day, when she was watching some particularly odd-looking eels, water fizzed and frothed around her. Matisha lost all sense of balance and direction. Matisha was terrified. She saw other fish floating past her. These poor fish were being scooped out of the water in nets. She was one of the lucky few who escaped the local fishermen who had thrown explosive dynamite into the pool. From that day on, whenever Matisha saw a human on the riverbank, she would quickly swim away in fear. Over time, Matisha came to know that although most animals were friendly, they were also hungry. She had fun teasing the big crocodiles darting away when they tried to snap at her, but she also had to learn to watch out for eagles. These giant birds dived into the river from great heights to try and catch a meal. One day, she noticed that the water had a strange, sour taste. It was also dark and smelly, making it difficult for Matisha to see where she was going. Her tummy started to hurt, and she found it hard to breathe. She also saw many dead fish floating past her. Matisha made her way steadily upstream. The water became clear again, and she was able to see that the black water was coming from a stream which joined the river next to a village. At times, Matisha felt lonely. All the other fish she had met had lost friends that looked just like her. Matisha had never met a fish that looked like she did. One day, while she was wondering what sort of fish she was, big raindrops started to flip and flop the river. As the rain fell harder and faster, the water began to rise. The river got deeper. The water smelled fresh, and without knowing why, Matisha started swimming against the flow. She swam through deep, swirling pools and great rapids. By now, the river was flowing so quickly that heavy boulders were rolling downstream, but Matisha kept going. As she powered her way upstream, Matisha noticed that she was not alone. Other fish of all sizes were dashing in the same direction. At one point, she was knocked aside by a gigantic fish. Quickly regaining her balance, Matisha saw a great big orange tail disappear into the water ahead. Matisha did not know where she was going, but as the rain continued to fall, she continued her journey upstream. Soon, the sound of the river changed to a deafening roar. Matisha had reached a deep pool beneath a great waterfall. A family of hungry otters were searching for their dinner and chased Matisha. They forced her to swim back downstream, where she found another deep pool to rest. Just above this pool, a stream flowed into the mighty river. Matisha had never sensed such sweet-smelling water before, and again started to swim upstream. In no time at all, she found she could go no further. A huge wall of concrete was blocking her way. It also blocked the way of the other fish which looked just like Matisha. She was overcome with joy. During her travels, Matisha's tummy had grown. She was carrying a precious cargo of thousands of tiny eggs, no bigger than a lentil each. Along with her new friends, she carefully laid her eggs, which sank into safe resting places between the stones at the bottom of the river. A few days later, Matisha arrived exhausted at the great gorge from where she had started her adventure as a baby fish. As monkeys played on the cliffs above, she noticed tiny fish washing past her. Content and happy, she wondered if the babies might be her own. Matisha was now old and wise. She had learned about the many other animals with whom she shared the river and surrounding forests. She had learned how humans can harm the river and the many dangers that her own babies would face. She now stayed in the safety of the deep, dark pool, out of sight for the years that followed. One morning, as the sun rose, cast a warm glow across the great pool. Tiger found the cliff face to drink from the river. As he did so, something caught his eye, something he had never seen before. In the water's dark depths, a huge shadow lurked. The shadow drifted into the sunlight, revealing its enormous size, beautiful glistening scales of gold, and bright orange fin. It was Matisha. She had grown into a majestic, one of the last giant humpback Mahseer on the planet. Matisha and the tiger looked at one another with mutual respect. Just as the mighty tiger is the king of the forest, Matisha was the mighty tiger of the river. As the tiger retreated into the safety of the forest, Matisha, the river tiger, sank back to the safety of the deep, dark pool. Perhaps she's still there.
Wow, that was really short and sweet and beautiful illustrations. And I also like the background score. So maybe you can enlighten us about who did the background score. And then we can start a small conversation on it because we also had session on Mahseer and Kaveri is rich in biodiversity. Lot of questions for you, Adrian. If you don't mind, I can start asking my questions about the book
Yes,
reading
please.
and all.
Yeah.
Very personal question, probably. A scientist, a professor, as you started also talking about it, writing a children's book. Do you think science now is really advancing to understand that we have to go beyond doing scientific work and connect to people and particularly to younger generation, even for the advancement of science? What was your experience of doing this book?
Well, I think you need some science to communicate because
Absolutely.
we need to make sure that we have our messaging
Yes.
correct. Um, but absolutely, there's no point in writing academic papers and only academics reading them. So it's really important to reach out to other audiences as well, particularly the younger generation. And it's been a really fun process, converting all the scientific knowledge and
Yes.
translating that into a story. It's probably the most fun writing I have ever done.
And probably most challenging also because you have to make those young little angels understand the science which you want to convey and which is a complex science. When we talk about a river ecosystem,
Yeah,
you write it in a very nice way that there is a coexistence. You start with story of monkey and with the story of uh, the tiger, and that also gives a comparison of the size and everything. I will ask some questions following the flow of the book so that we are also in some discipline. But first thing first, how did the name Matisha arrive?
I was looking for. So we have our Mahseer, we have our flagship species, our star of the show, and I was looking for a female name, Carvery
Okay.
being female. I was looking for a female name which began with M. So,
Wow.
um,
With
and
Mahseer. Mm.
I used Google to look for Indian girls' names, and eventually I found Matisha, the meaning being goddess. And I thought
Okay.
that fits perfectly. So, goddess Cauvery, here we have Matisha, goddess, fish.
And that's a
So, as soon as I saw
right.
that name, I thought, okay, my character is Matisha Mahseer.
That makes a quite good sense because we actually have most of the rivers we call them as Ma, as you know, Ganga Ma. So
Yeah,
we already add the mother at the end, and we also see that in the story how Matisha also carries those baby Matishas along with, and you mention it very nicely that once
yeah.
she is done now with her reproduction, she is exhausted and walking around. And I didn't know that Matisha is also name of a god, so good to know that. And when you were planning to write this story, I'm curious now to understand, did the pictures arrive first or did the stories, and or both of them came together? How was it?
No, the
And
story came first.
the research behind.
Well, yes, I mean, there was a lot of research behind, and I had spent quite a lot of time sitting silently on the banks of the River Cauvery,
Hmm.
actually fishing for Mahseer. I'd been obsessed with this fish from a very early age. I'd seen pictures in magazines, and I came to the River Cauvery with a view to try and catch one and release it because I wanted to see one of these fish in real life. To this day, I have still never caught one for
Oh,
various reasons, which this is why they are critically endangered. But going back to the question, I've spent a lot of time sat on the banks of the River Cauvery,
hmm.
observing the wildlife, which I consider an absolute paradox. It, so there was a lot of research that went into it, wrote a load of scientific papers, and then Maya contacted me completely out of the blue, probably around about 2018, and asked
Okay.
whether I'd consider writing. Within 2 days, I think I'd written the book. I think I'd
Mhm.
pretty much written the story. It took a few tweaks after that. And then I asked Maya to produce a couple of sample pictures that we could send to publishers to pitch the book to try and get it published. Um, and we sent it to a few, and Speaking Tiger got back to us very quickly and said we would like to publish this. But there's from sitting on the river and knowing that these fish are migratory, it's um, it's kind of strange. I was able to write it so quickly because I'd spent so long researching and thinking about this fish and thinking about all the dangers they face and the journeys they must undertake. I kind of had it all in my head, and I wanted to make sure that I included all the wildlife, drew the readers to all the wildlife that was associated with the
Mhm.
river as well in the riparian zone. So I just wanted to build in a lot of serious issues, such as migration, such as dams, such as pollution, such as overfishing with dynamite, but also the interactions of all the other wildlife as well. So I
Mm.
basically created a list. These are all the things I want to
Yeah.
include in the book. And it
Yeah.
came together really quickly. And then as soon as we had a publisher, Maya cracked on and did all the drawings. So it's a
Nice.
fascinating process. And for me, bringing art to my words was something quite special, something that I'm very proud of. And I know that Maya's very proud of this book as well.
That's very nice to learn that your forest bathing for a long, long time was more,
Yeah.
it was more like you were processing the story along with the forest life. And
Yeah.
how beautiful it is that actually in the book you also talk about where the minor details for children to understand where the eggs will be laid, how when the fish becomes bigger, that they have to navigate to other places. They are very simply written for children to make it understand. I mean, I will ask a little bit question more as a professional. It is difficult for humans to see the water beneath, right? And especially in the river, which is flowing, and which has very special fish, as you are talking about, Mahseer, and of course there are other fishes as well. What it is like to work with subject like fish, especially when, I mean, as a scientist, when we are doing surveys, we do people survey, we do some other sample survey. So land-based studies somehow looks more doable than water-based studies, particularly if it is underwater. Uh, what it is actually to do a research on underwater species, both aquatic flora and fauna, and especially when you have to talk about a particular species, how do you follow their life? And I'm sure there are new advanced technologies also to do that. Could you please enlighten a little bit more on how ichthyologists are actually studying fishes? I mean, for that matter, when you are not seeing them in everyday life, what is the process of studying fishes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a phrase that fish scientists use a lot, and that's out of sight, out of mind. And this is
Mm,
why flagship species, conservation species, like the tiger, like the giant panda, people love
yes,
butterflies and birds because you can see them. You can walk around and observe them in the forest. The
yes,
fish you do not see unless
yes.
you bring the fish to you. And there's various ways of doing that. The rivers of India are very challenging because they're big,
Mm,
wild rivers. You've got monsoonal flows, and fish are constantly moving around. So when you've got
mm,
low flows, you might not have all the fish in that particular place. So there's
mm,
sometimes you just can't sample everywhere. So you need a range of methods to understand the community structure and the ecology of these fish. So you can use nets. Um, you can use something called electric fishing. People have a very, in India, people have a very negative idea of what electric fishing is. But in actual fact, it's
mm,
a technique that we use in the West. That is our main sampling strategy. And by using electricity, not to electrocute or shock fish, but using
yes.
it as a magnet to tickle the fish and cause muscle contractions, you can get them to swim towards you, net them out, and they've recovered instantly. And that way,
Uh-huh.
you can measure the fish, you can take a scale off the fish to see how old it is, and you can see the growth rates and then allow the fish to go. But yes, other methods that we use, these fish migrate great distances. So what we can do is we can use radio and acoustic transmitter
Mm,
tags, which can be inserted inside the fish. And then those fish can be followed on their journeys, and we can plot how far they move, but more importantly, what the critical habitats are for those fish. So where do they spawn? What do they need to spawn? What size stones? And also, people tend to think of fish habitat of what the big fish use. But we need to remember that these fish are eggs, then they're tiny, tiny little fry, and they have different habitat requirements at different stages throughout their life. So it's no good
mm.
just studying the big fish. We need to study the smaller ones too. But what I will say in terms of the monitoring, there is very little data on fish, particularly the big fish, which are
Mm.
more endangered across Asia because of the difficulties of sampling them. On the Cauvery, there were some established fishing camps, as I visited the first time, where all the fish were caught and then released again. And
Oh.
that generated data, so daily angler logs. And it was this data that I actually used. Without this data, we would never have known. Well, the humpback Mahseer still would not have a scientific name, and we would not know it was critically endangered. And the humpback Mahseer would not have any protection at the moment at all. And it's only because of the data collected by anglers that we have been able to advance in this way.
With just to understand about the Mahseer situation, not only in India and abroad, as we already had sessions on Mahseer earlier, also in Wednesdays for Water with Steve Lockett and Mahseer Trust. I'm curious to understand, as you were mentioning in India, that it is a very recent phenomena that we are now taking more attention to it. How is it around the world? do you already have data on the varieties of Mahseer, or does India have different varieties of Mahseer, or it is depending on different regions, or how is it? I mean, the typology as well as are the different Mahseers means different scaling patterns, different sizes. What is the classification in broad understanding?
Yeah. Well, when I started working on Mahseer in 2010, 2011, because as soon as I got back from my first trip, I was going through all the scientific literature and I was fascinated. And I realized that very little was known. In 2019, so that's almost a decade
10
of
years.
research between Bournemouth University, Mahseer Trust, and Kerala University of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences. We had done extensive literature reviews, we'd collected a lot of our own data. We were able to publish a big breakthrough paper called Mahseer Fishes of the World. And if anybody listening is interested, if you Google Mahseer Fishes of the World, it will take you to a free download of that manuscript. But in summary, to answer your question, Nancy, we now know there are 17 species of Mahseer,
Wow.
and they're distributed across from South and Southeast Asia, so from Pakistan across the Himalayas, down through India, down through Myanmar, Bhutan, down through Thailand, Malaysia, across to Vietnam and into Indonesia. But India has 8 of those species
Wow.
present, and they all have things in common. They all have great big scales. They all grow to large sizes. But in terms of what we know about them, only 9 of them have IUCN Red List assessments, which
Okay,
aren't.
already listed by IUCN.
Yeah, well, they're all listed, but 8 of them are data deficient, meaning we just still
Oh.
don't have enough data to say just how endangered they are. And people often misinterpret data deficient as not being as important as critically endangered. But that attitude needs to change, because some of those fish that are data deficient could potentially already be extinct. The problem is trying to
Yeah,
find them
yeah,
and get
most
sufficient data.
likely.
Yeah,
I think that's the challenge, which is here to stay. The fact that we are not able to do so much of deep diving, in physical deep diving into the water, water life in the water or underwater, as SDG calls it, and probably many species are yet not found. But when Mahseer is living in so many places across, as I understand, the global south, if I may say so. Maybe it is also because these areas are studied, or other places it has little difference, and that they have siblings. But when you say India has already 8 types typology, I'm just curious to understand, and it's a tricky question I will ask. Is Kaveri known for Mahseer, or the vice versa, or Mahseer known for Kaveri? And how is it revered not only in India but the other countries of South Asia, as you were mentioning? Is it, do people still see it as the tiger fish, or some connotation to it, or some acknowledgement, and does it really make a difference when we talk about it as the signature fish, or the you had a flagship fish? Because I see that in India, when Project Tiger is there, everybody is excited. So there is a big creature, you know about it, and we have already a very wrong notion in mind that it is at the top of the pyramid of life cycle, which is not true. But we see it that way because we were educated as children like that. How is it in the river? And let's say we talk about Kaveri. Will you consider it as the king, or the tiger of the river? Literally, in
absolutely.
scientific sense, also.
Well, yes, and it is sort of public attitude. People who know about it do call it the tiger of the river. This fish,
Oh,
the humpback marcia, Matisha, is the largest of all the 17 species. So Matisha, or the humpback marcia, can grow to the size of a man. So
oh,
60 kilograms, 1.6 meters in length. These are some of the biggest freshwater fish in the world. And the humpback mahseer is the biggest mahseer in the world. And because of that reason, and the fact that the humpback mahseer is endemic only to the River Cauvery, it occurs nowhere else.
Oh.
It became known as the most famous mahseer
Mm.
in the West as well. That every angler or anybody interested in fish outside India, they all know the mahseer.
Wow. So it is
Um,
famous, just like the tiger and the lions of India.
yeah, but until we did our research, it was quite depressing to find that the numbers of the humpback mahseer had depleted by way more than 90% in the last 20 years.
Wow.
The range of this fish, it was once spread throughout the whole of the Carberry catchment before we had dams, other invasive species.
Yes.
But now the population is restricted to one or two fragmented pockets.
Of the
Um,
entire river basin, you mean?
yes, absolutely.
Wow.
So it's
That's
very,
so
very
heartening.
rare now.
Disheartening.
Yeah. Yeah. Outside India, Carberry is probably the most famous of the Mahseer rivers. However, there's a lot of interest in the Himalayan golden Mahseer as well, which occurs across the
Yes, but
Himalayas.
it's quite small in size, if I understood rightly, as
No,
compared to
no,
Matisha.
they don't grow as big as Matisha, but they still very big fish. I mean, they still grow to 35, maybe 40 kilograms
Wow.
and over a meter and a half in length. So very powerful fish. Again, they're called the tiger of the river because they're yellow with a black stripe down.
Yeah.
But in terms of other species as well, in Malaysia and Indonesia, Mahseer are most valuable for food. So they reach very high prices. So obviously that's a real challenge for their conservation.
Yes.
Other values as well. So fish that I've been working on. So the Himalayan golden mahseer, for instance, in Nepal, in some river catchments, people use the mahseer for all sorts of medicinal reasons.
I was
So
about to ask that. What is there in the
yeah, so,
body, the fish?
so to the gallbladder to treat asthma and gout and all sorts of body parts for all sorts of different ailments. Um, and in the going back to the River Cauvery, these fish are also of huge religious importance as well. So a
Hmm.
lot of temple pools, these fish are present, and people come and worship them and feed them puffed rice. But in the Cauvery, in certain areas, there are tribes who actually worship the humpback mahseer as their gods.
Hmm. So when you talk about the cultural importance here, I'm just curious to understand in India, particularly in Kaveri, is it still one of the food component, or it is really they're now seen as god or tiger, and there is a conscious effort not only by the government but also by the people to make sure that they survive or for their conservation? Where are we standing in the scale of 1 to 10 in our conscious understanding that we need to save Mahseer?
I would love to say it was number 10. I'm going
Wow.
to say it's a number one. There are
Oh,
very, very tiny
that is
areas.
disheartening.
There are very tiny areas where people worship the fish.
So
Throughout
this is
most of
what
the river, it's
tribal or probably local indigenous people then.
in some areas. In other areas, they're not so aware. And in most of the Carberry River, the fish has now pretty much disappeared. Um, but things are starting to change, and the work we're doing, we're here in India at the moment to talk with Kerala Biodiversity Board and Forest Department.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already had some really positive meetings. We've written a conservation action plan, and
Mm.
at last, this seems to be being taken seriously. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of changing attitudes, filling knowledge gaps. But I'm confident that over the next few years, we are going to at last have the resources and backing to start making some of these changes. So hopefully it will be a more positive. Next time you ask me on a scale from 1 to 10, I hope it
I
to be
hope
more.
so. I hope so.
I'm
And I think
aiming
this,
for a five.
yeah, and I think these kind of contributions, because the thing is, like, for example, if I have not been educated in my childhood about something like Matisha to appreciate, of course, I'm going to grow insensitive towards Matisha. Just to give you an example, and that's where I see children book are so powerful tools to bring a change in the society in that sense, for that matter. And we can and I remember from my understanding, when from Japanese literature, and how Japanese children book were, because I was engaged with children out there during my residency in Kyoto, and how children look at nature very differently because of the way they are being educated right from the childhood. I mean, I had my neighbors' children who used to catch fish or some things from the flowing river and bring home, and their parents used to show the book, or through tablet or internet, show everything about the fish, and children will next day go back and put the fish back into the river.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they are one day wiser about that creature, and they can appreciate it more. But having not learned, it becomes completely different. Let me ask a question. When you said the egg of the river from rice size to growing to 60 kilos,
yeah.
what is the timeline to grow that big?
We don't know. We don't know.
Okay,
In
yeah, because you're studying different
yeah.
subjects. Not one. You
So
cannot follow one species, one fish particularly.
yeah, yeah. So in temperate areas, like in the UK, you can take a scale from a fish, and a scale is like a tree trunk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Like the tree trunk.
it
Yes.
has annual rings because you have cold winters when the fish doesn't grow, and you have warm summers when the fish grows rapidly. So that's why you get rings. In India, you have a fairly constant temperature and the fish are constantly growing. So taking the scales from the fish, it's very, very difficult to read them. And as the fish get
Oh,
bigger and bigger, the lines get closer and closer together. So there's a lot of challenges. So, excuse me, in answer to your question, we really don't know. And I'd be guessing, but large carps can live 40 years perhaps. This is going to be a reasonably fast growing fish. So I would say it probably takes 3 years for them to grow to a size where they might be able to reproduce for the first time. 3 or 4 years, which would be about 35, 40 centimeters. But how long it
mm.
takes them to get from that size to 50 kilos in weight, nobody knows. And we may never know.
Yeah, that will be challenge of the research also. As we started talking about doing underwater research is always going to remain challenge.
Yeah.
Yes, and personally, to be honest, who is trying to move out of this whole Anthropocene conversations in the science, I actually feel it is better that humans don't study many species, because the more we know about them, the more we are destroying. But to look at it in another way, the more we know about someone, we are also more prepared to protect and conserve them in some way. That brings me to the question on what are the present day human threats to Matisha, because if a life of Matisha has to be reproductive in 3 4 years, then what is a natural death timeline? Do we know about it? And in that timeline, there are many things happening in her life, or his life, for that matter, all Mahseer's life, when they have to also change waters because of their size, because of their reproduction requirement, and many more things. Uh, what kind of different threats, other than fishing for that matter, are really faced by Mahseer at this moment? Pollution being, of course, one of
Yeah.
them, and that's also Anthropocene.
Yeah, I think I've captured most of them in the book. So you've got your pollution, you've got your dams, which prevent
Yes.
migration. Also, if you put a dam, the river upstream is no longer a river. It's a great big
Yes.
deep lake. So the river has
Yes.
gone. The habitat for Marcia has disappeared. Downstream of the dam, you have less flow because the water is being held back. Abstraction. I can't remember how many megaliters are extracted every day to be pumped
Wow.
to Bangalore alone. So with growing cities, the pressure on water is immense. Climate change is adding to the problem as well.
Yeah. So the
Um,
temperature of the water, you mean?
yes, absolutely, yeah, but also limiting the amount of water
Yes.
available. Um, and probably the big one that wasn't mentioned in the book because it gets too complicated. Remember,
Yeah,
this
for
is a kid.
children it should not be
This,
there, but we are just discussing out of curiosity. For
yeah,
children it will be too much.
yeah, it was getting too complicated at this stage. But this is what a lot of the research has been on. And one of the biggest threats to the humpback mahseer has been the introduction of non-native fish, including the stocking of non-native mahseers, which has been done in the name of conservation, but it was the wrong species of
Oh,
mahseer. Now that species of mahseer has established and is doing quite well, and that has driven the collapse of the
so they
humpback
have their
mahseer.
colony now.
Yes, and that species has spread throughout most of the Cauvery. And this is why the humpback Mahseer only survives in one or two places. So invasive species are, you've got all these threats working in combination. But once you throw in an invasive species which proliferates and competes with the humpback Mahseer, that appears to have been the final straw that has pushed the humpback Mahseer over the edge. And ironically, although dams are really bad for fish because they stop migration, in this case, it's a very unusual case. In the Cauvery, where the only last remaining populations of spawning humpback mahseer exist, is above dams. And the reason being,
Oh,
those
in the deeper
dams,
water.
yes. So you got the
Wow.
reservoirs and that, but the river upstream of there as well. But the reason is the dams have prevented migration, but the dams have prevented the upstream migration of the invasive species. So where the
Oh,
humpback mahseer remains is because there's no invasive species there. So it's critical that we protect these areas and don't allow non-natives to get in there. Because as soon as they do, humpback mahseer disappears.
yeah, you remind me something because I work on lakes personally from my for my scientific studies, and we have catfish, which is becoming so problematic that it does not allow other fishes to grow, and then it is carnivorous by itself, so it is also
Yeah.
eating up other small fishes and all. So is Matisha carnivorous or herbivorous? Just a quick question on that.
So, sorry, can you repeat that last bit?
Is Matisha Mahseer carnivorous or herbivorous? That
Yes,
is
good question. Omnivorous. So mahseers,
okay.
I think all mahseers will eat pretty much everything. But the humpback mahseer, Matisha, um, shame we haven't got a picture to show you, but the mouth of the humpback mahseer, the really big ones,
I
I,
have
I
seen
can I
some
can put I can
pictures.
put my head in their mouth, so
Wow,
they can eat
like
big fish.
crocodile. So like a
Yes,
crocodile.
yeah, they can eat. My colleague here might be trying to find a photograph. I think here we go. So that this is a picture of me looking
Oh,
through the skull of one of the big mahseers. This fish
wow.
was caught in the 1800s or 1900s. We found this skull in Mysore Museum. So
In the museum.
this
Hmm.
gives you an idea of what they might be capable of eating. So they can eat big fish, and they will eat big fish, but they will also graze algae. They'll eat crabs. They'll eat invertebrates.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, to grow to that size, you need to eat a lot.
Absolutely. You need
So,
to fill your
so
belly.
I think the answer to your question is yes, they are top predators, and because they're top predators, they are also considered umbrella species. So
Okay.
if you have Marcia present, it means that all the other species do well underneath them.
Yeah, so which also means that there will be kind of a balance which will be created the way we look at tiger on the land. And
Yeah, that's right.
probably that's important to understand for us that presence of Mahseer also ensures presence of an ecosystem of fish which is there. In
And
if we
beyond,
say it that way.
and beyond, because if you've got a healthy river ecosystem, you've got a healthy river, you've also got a healthy riparian habitat. And it's not just the fish in the river, they're connected to the broader wildlife as well. So you've got, as in the book, you've got fish eating birds, you've got crocodiles that eat fish, you've got otters that eat fish. So, if the fish disappear in a river, if the river's not healthy, you lose all those
Hmm.
other animals. You lose your kingfishers, you lose your fish-eating eagles, you lose your crocodiles, otters, etc., etc. So they really
Hmm.
are umbrella species.
Yeah, just to understand again, I'm trying to link it with my research, and I'm trying to understand how catfish has become a problem as an invasive. When you have this colony of other Mahseer, are they like genetically grown Mahseer, or when you say invasive species, or are they coming from somewhere else, relocated, dislocated, or what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of hatchery rearing of Mahseer in India
Okay,
for a
as
long
part of
time.
conservation, as part
Yeah,
of conservation. Oh,
for 40 or 50 years, this has been going on. And over that time period, different species of Mahseer have been bred in different hatcheries, and different species of Mahseer have been introduced all over India.
hmm.
So the Himalayan golden Mahseer is called Himalayan golden Mahseer for a reason. That's where it lives. But it has more recently, in the last 20 years, been bred in hatcheries. It now occurs in lakes in Maharashtra and other
Wow,
places.
that's pretty.
It was even taken to Papua New Guinea and is established in Papua New
Wow.
Guinea. So, yeah, this fish that you assume needs cold water has adapted and done very well in other areas. So, yes, the the Mahseers that have invaded the River Cauvery, another species, that has come from hatcheries. And we have very clear evidence of where it came from when it was introduced. And if you
Hmm.
visited my research papers, if anybody's
Yes.
interested in learning more, those details are in there.
Yes, indeed. So if I have to understand it a little bit further in the sense like where are Matisha been taken in terms of if they are caught, or if they are other than food, I think their body also highlights some special components in the fish. And why it is golden now? Usually, most of the fishes are in more different grayish colors and all. Uh, Other than food, some medicines, as you said, in South Asia, um, is India using Mahseer in other way? And when we talk about this procreation through alternate means or relocation from here and there, is it only for looking at fish as food production? I recall when catfish was brought to India, it was it was to cater to the food production and livelihood of fisher folks in the lakes, and now it is catastrophic, and now we are also having a catastrophic invasion of some turtles around. I mean, I get phone calls every few weeks about invasive turtles which grows in the ponds and lakes in many folds. uh, what is the reason, other than conservation and food, let's say, uh, what should be the reason that they are relocating or dislocating? I usually don't like the word relocating, but
Yeah.
dislocating fishes from their own colony and putting it there. And that a follow-up question, because I have asked this earlier also, because in Wednesdays for Water we run a biodiversity series, and I often ask them, do the fishes have feelings? Because if I am taken away from my family and colony, uh, I mean, personally, I'm okay, but usually we feel homeless, we feel emotional. Has emotions of Mahseer been captured somehow? I'm
Right.
asking two questions, sorry.
That was a lot of
I'm
complexity.
getting more and more excited. I wish I
So
was a 6 and 8 year old child.
so let's backtrack. So
Yes,
your question about is there any good reason to relocate species
yes.
from one to another? The answer is no, absolutely not. And it's relocating species around the globe has caused
Hmm.
nothing but
Yes,
problems,
yes.
huge economical losses as well. Okay, and in
Economic loss
our
also? Hmm.
huge economic loss. Australia, for instance, I can't remember how many multiple millions of dollars are spent every year trying to eradicate common carp, which have invaded their rivers.
Hmm.
In the US, they spend, again, I don't know, it's multi millions, maybe more, to try and eradicate some of the Asian species that have come in as well, and are particularly invading the Great Lakes, which is a real problem there. But in India, in our experience, fishermen who rely on the river and reservoirs complain about invasive species.
Oh,
Although, one of the reasons is the fisheries department. The role of the fisheries departments in India is to produce fish from hatcheries to stock reservoirs. And of course, the problem is the reservoirs are connected to the river as well. But what happens is, while the reservoirs used to have fish that local people wanted to eat, what we end up now is with invasive species which quickly take over that nobody wants to eat. So the fishermen are complaining that although the fisheries department are putting fish in and saying there's lots of fish for you to catch, they're not the fish that anybody wants to eat. So the walking
okay.
African walking catfish are just of no value. And as well with common carp, although they're popular in some parts of the world to eat, in India, from my understanding, is nobody wants to eat them. So
No.
it's only negatives. So I hope that's answered your question on the first part. The other one was about feelings and emotion, wasn't it? What do you think, Nancy? Do you think they do?
I think they feel. I think they have feelings. This is one of the biggest misunderstanding humans have, that other creatures or other species do not have feelings. That's my way of looking at it. I know
Yeah,
trees have feelings. They communicate.
yeah, absolutely. And fish certainly communicate as well through things like pheromones. So they'll release chemical signals. So they do communicate with one another, and they can attract one another using these
Yes.
signals as well. Um, so there may be something there in terms of emotional intelligence. I don't think we currently. I mean, I'm not a fish behaviorist, so
Yeah.
I'm
So
more of an
maybe
ecologist. So it's not my area of study, but I'm not aware of any research that has gone anywhere near evidencing that they have
new
feelings.
research, new
Yeah,
research for us. Maybe
yeah, yeah,
we make new story. And also probably the colony behavior tells us a lot of things about how they communicate. But communication is one thing, and having feelings is something different. And yes, you need fish behavioral scientists to work
yeah,
on. But when we were talking about invasive species, I would like to share with you that because I've started working on Warden Sea between the big North Sea, ally between Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, and they are also one of the biggest concern of invasive species like the Pacific oyster, the sea walnut, like a jellyfish-like thing, and then raccoon dog, this American clam, and few more. I think some slipper limpet, if I am saying the name
yeah,
rightly, but and the shrimps are now, oh, that Netherlands is growing shrimp left, right, and center. The same in many European countries. And the Warden Sea's native species are struggling to live. So
yeah,
in rivers, when we have more Mahseer, as we were talking about, not more, but there is always a capacity of every river. Presence of Mahseer is also a sign of a healthy ecosystem, as we were talking about. And when we look at the life underwater, somehow people like us who have never been underwater, we have a tendency to keep comparing it with what we know life on the land. So
yeah,
talking about people and banyan tree, and then we start thinking about the entire ecosystem. We talk about tiger and lion, and then we start looking at the entire ecosystem. That
yeah,
way, probably I am getting my understanding that to understand Kaveri, maybe humpback Mahseer is an important entry point to understand the life of fishes around in the whole basin. I learned from your book, and also while reading, that it is called Tor Rama Devi as a scientific name. I just got curious because it somehow sounds very Indian. But is it really the scientific name of Mahseer? Can you just
yes.
throw some light on it?
Yeah, so Tor is the name of the genus. So you've got
Okay.
17 species. The first name is Tor, and then
Hmm.
you have the scientific name for them. And it's quite an interesting story. the name Tor Remedevi. When I started working on Mahseer, so when I had been fishing, I didn't know what these species were. So when I returned to the UK and couldn't find the answer in any books,
Mm-hmm.
I contacted the Zoological Society Survey of India, and I asked to
Okay.
speak with a fish specialist to see
Mm-hmm.
if anybody could help me with
Mm-hmm.
helping me understand these things. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
"There's nobody here, but we can point you in the." A lady called Dr. Remedevi pointed
Oh.
me to Dr. Raghavan at Kufos, where I'm sat at this very moment, and we started working on this species. And our
Mm-hmm.
research allowed us to make sure the fish had a name, get it red listed. And I remember
Okay.
it was back 8, 9 years later before I interacted with Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Remedevi again. And I sent her an email and I said, due to your introducing me to Dr. Raghavan, we now know what the humpback Mahseer is. And you'll be
Wow.
pleased to know that the largest Mahseer in the world is named after you, Tor Remedevi,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's also critically endangered. So she seemed very pleased. She said, "Thank you very much for letting me know. I just wish it wasn't called a humpback."
It was called what?
The humpback. She didn't like
But
being
this is so
associated.
interesting that the scientist herself wasn't knowing that this is happening, and it is so nice that also the name comes from a female scientist, because something which is revered in India, women, water, a lot. Although you know that both women and water are in bad shape in India, because now you're traveling so many times, there's nothing to hide from you or give you a very false picture of it. And I strongly believe, as a woman leader myself, the state of women and water in the country tells the development index or status of the country itself. And I think that's a good conversation going on, but we have to bring a closure to the conversation as well. I hope it was not too tough for you that I'm asking more questions, but I really like that little child in me to explore these kind of interesting subjects and learn about it. I remain a good student for you and would like to learn more about Mahseer and other activities that you are engaging in. If you have any questions, any points that you would like to highlight, maybe I take your closing remarks at this point.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me on, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And we must thank Steve for organizing this event. Thank you so much. Please take care and keep inspiring us, keep doing the good work. See you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye.